there, welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychuck with Queen Bee Creations, and today is a thrift flip video. I think this is probably the most popular kind of video that I do, and really it's just my everyday stuff. It's the what do I need to do to get things ready for the shop. So it starts with cool or different, interesting finds. So anything that I find when I'm out thrifting that I think has potential. So let's see what you think. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you the items that I purchased and the first start to what I'm going to do. So just basically, because if it's basic paint, to start, I'm not going to show you that part because you've seen people paint things, but I want to talk about planning. So here's the first item. Now this is just a nice, solid, polished board, and with these really cool little leaf knobs. But as you can see, it's kind of nondescript. It just all blends and disappears. So the first thing that we're going to do is pop these knobs out, and the pale gold, it's almost like a champagne gold. Oh, okay, well, maybe not popping. Popping these out may have been the wrong term. I will be removing these, and what I want to do is I'm gonna sand this board and see if I can remove a little bit of the finish. This is like a factory finish on it. So I want to get that out. Oh, here we go, here's one coming. They're just a little bit more stubborn. Now, what I did do is I recorded what I paid for these. So these hooks and this board was $6. And I have to tell you, anytime that I get see a board like this with interesting hooks and they're a decent price, I pick it up because $6 for these 5 little knobs is a great price. So it may mean that I don't use it as a board with hooks. Maybe I'm just going to remove the hooks and use them on a different project. That's okay too. And then I use the board for something else. So don't overlook something like this in your thrift store if you see it because you're thinking, oh, I don't really need a board with some hooks. I just don't need a little coat rack or something. Because the board could be used for a sign, it could be used for a base sawn in half and used for 2 bases for 2 projects or 2 different signs, or a shelf sitter. And maybe the knobs or the hooks, if it happens to be hooks, these are knobs, you could use on a piece of furniture perhaps, or a different project. So I love finds like this. So some of them, the whole screw is coming out with it. The screw is remaining behind, and I can see that there was a fair bit of glue, which is not popping out very well. This one, well, that's gonna be difficult. This one just sheared right in half. So I have neither. So it may end up being a 4-hook project. And you know what? That happens too, right? Like sometimes things don't work out. We'll see what I can do. I'm gonna have to take some pliers and get this out, but I'm gonna get it sanded down, and these probably spray painted, likely black. So a matte black so they look more cast iron. Once this is sanded, and I'll see what I can do about these screws, then we'll come back and we'll see whether I'm able to stain them or not. I thrifted this. So it is an old, dusty looking artichoke artichoke. So a lot of times I get people that ask, well, how do you dust these? I just take like a fat paintbrush and I start getting into all the crevices, which I've already done. It had a lot of cobwebs, actually. So this one, I am going to start by painting it copper in Pennies from Heaven. Now this is going to be very bright. That's not where we're ending up with this. I want to do kind of a cool, fun, different finish for you so that I'm not just doing the same thing that you've always seen, but I'm going to start by giving it copper. Probably just one coat is going to do because we're going to be doing other layering, but that's what's happening to that. We're going a little wild, a little funky. It should be good. This is an old, dusty, carved loon. So I love this as a shelf sitter, but you can tell, like, it looks really old, really tired. It needs a new paint job. So we're going to be painting it first in Farm Fresh by DIY. So a lovely, soft green for that one. This guy, so it's a plant stake, and it's just a lovely decorative little wooden house. I don't think that I need to do a lot to this. What I am going to do is I'm going to paint the roof red, and I'm going to paint the base green. So I've got Marquee Red by DIY, and I have Fancy Farm Girl from DIY as well. And I think, and then we'll see how that goes, because I'm thinking that those painted and distressed may be all that it needs so that we get that worn look, but give it a little bit more of a cabinet feel and a little bit more of a finished feel than this has going for it. But I think this is a pretty cute little plant stake, you know, sticking out in the garden. So I think that could be fun as we head into spring. So let me tell you, this guy, the artichoke, I got for $3.50. My loon was $5. My little log house was $3. So bear in mind, I got my senior's discount on all of those. And then I have this big basket. Here's the bottom. So obviously a repair is needed, and that's where we're gonna go with this one. But for this big rectangular basket, which is actually in good shape, I love the wood on it. We've got some handles, nice slatted bottom, but we are going to paint this up, and I'm going to start by painting the wood sections and leaving this natural if I can. We're going to just paint the wood white to just kind of brighten it up a little. So that paint goes with that. All right, so that's what I'm going to do to get started, is just the basic painting, get that done out of the way. And as we start moving into secondary treatments, we're going to come back and start talking about the direction I'm taking them. And I think that's going to be fun. So let's get started. My board now has gone from a simple one to a problem child, but you know what? That's what happens with thrift flips sometimes. It doesn't always go to plan. So let's see where we can take that one. I've sanded this down. Still haven't figured out what I'm doing over there, but what I am going to do is I'm going to start staining this and see. So before I paint, I wanted to try staining. I'm not sure how well this wood, it's a very hard wood, is going to take the stain. So I'm trying it first. And then if it doesn't work, I can paint. So the stain that I'm using is diluted coffee. And I just mix this up in, obviously, a little jar. I just have the instant crystals. If you have leftover coffee, then you can use that. But you can see you get this rich golden brown. And because it's just pretty, it's just coffee and water, And you can mix it however strong or however weak that you'd like. And then you just keep applying coats until you have the depth of color that you want. So it's kind of an easy peasy stain. You could also do really strong tea as well. Tea will have a little bit of a brownier cast, and the coffee has a little bit more of a golden cast to it. But I use this often in the shop because when I'm working on like maybe an old piece and I'm just trying to level out some of the colors, maybe I haven't sanded the whole thing, I find that the coffee stain tends to take it back to that old finish the fastest, the easiest, without trying to match up a bunch of stains off of, you know, the hardware shelf, right? The hardware store shelf. Coffee is probably going to give you the finish that you're looking for. So already I like the characteristic of this. I'm probably going to do another 1 or 2 coats on it. So again, I'm just going to let this dry and then paint on again, let it dry, and just take it down to the depth I want. Once we seal it, it's going to be a little bit more, it's going to dry lighter, and when we go to seal it, it's going to have a little bit more of the character that it has when it's wet. But you can see that there's some lovely grain happening in this wood. If I get that depth of color with that and get it sealed up, the contrast with a matte black knob is going to be lovely. And it's going to have some character to it, whereas that really pale finish with those champagne gold, like the super pale gold knobs just kind of disappeared, right? So I'll get a couple more coats on that, and then we'll be able to get that one sealed up. All right, our little house is dry. Now, they had glued on these little windows, and they were in just a plain bright color of wood, just plain. So since I was coffee staining the other piece of wood, I just painted on a little bit of the coffee stain, just so that, I mean, they're fine to be on there, but they were just too pristine. They were too pristine looking. So what I want to do now is lightly distress this. It's just, yeah, it just looks a little too new. I just want to smooth out the edging, both on the green and the red. All right, and just kind of quickly dust it off. Now, because this is like a little log cabin, what I do want is to darken this out a little bit. And so for that, instead of doing a dark wax, again, because I have the coffee stain, I'm just going to use it. And I'm just going to kind of brush it over, certainly over this green, because I'd like it to be, you know, just a little bit darker and just a little bit more worn looking. And then once it's dry, I will clear wax it to seal, because the coffee stain obviously does not seal in any way. And then on this, I just want to do a little bit of edging. Just here and there on the roof, just to highlight a little bit those details. And that's it. So for this, it really was a minimal transformation. I just need to let this dry, add a little bit of clear wax over it, and then this piece is done. But what's nice about it is that now with the red and the green, it looks like a little log cabin that you'd actually find out in the woods. And it's gonna be much cuter added to a garden. What I want to do is actually do a little bit of work on this one. So the first thing that I want to add to this one is a little bit of turquoise wax. So this is called Shipwrecked, and it's a turquoise wax from DIY, which looks awesome with copper. And what I want to do is mostly get it down in a lot of those details. So I want to get it down in the lows. It's kind of going to give it a bit of a patinaed look. So we're going to get it down into all of those lows. And then brush off a lot of the excess, especially on the outside. Once we have all of that turquoise positioned where we want it, I then actually want to take dark wax. So I want to take some brown wax and grab a different brush. So again, very light. And I want to start taking that a little bit up on the outside of my petals. So we're going to be darkening them on those outside edges. It's going to dull it down a little bit, but it's going to give a little bit more definition to the tips. And we've got the turquoise wax on the inside, kind of doing a little bit of aging, so that it's not this super bright copper that's here. It's going to dull it down a little bit, but it's going to add a little bit more definition. And ultimately, we can let these waxes dry, and then I can buff them up again. So we're doing two wax treatments to this, just to get a little bit more of an aged, antiqued look to the copper, and adding a little bit of that verdigris look to it. For our loom, this one also needs to get sanded. We're not doing a major sanding on it, but we want to definitely smooth it out, right? There's probably going to be a little definition around that beak area, around the head, but more than anything else, we want to do a light sanding just to be able to smooth off any of that chippy paint and just highlight some of the natural curves. For this one, I want to use a combination of clear wax. You can see immediately how that wax just darkens that DIY paint, bringing it back to its natural color, right? Just kind of darkens that out. So I want to get that clear wax over the full body of this. And then I want to add a little bit of white wax to it, just to soften some of those tones out a little bit. I want to apply some of my white wax. And I'm at the bottom. We're just going to use the last little bits of this. But it's going to cover the entire piece. And then we'll wipe it back. So you can see, because I've got that clear wax on, just a little tiny bit, because there's like nothing in there, goes a long way. There we go. And now I'm just going to lightly wipe back. I don't want to wipe back vigorously because then I'll take off all of that white wax, in which case then what was the point? But I also want to use fairly smooth, itchy nose. I want to use fairly smooth gestures because I'm adding in kind of marks here as I go. And there we go. I love this. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this to dry so then we can buff it up, and then that's that one done. I do want to do just a little bit of distressing on our slats here because they're not painted perfectly, but if I distress them, then it makes it look like that was deliberate. So I'm gonna distress this a little bit, distress the top a little bit, and then we can start looking at assembling this. I have the white base all painted and ready to kind of put back into the rest of the basket. Now here's a little bit of a challenge. This has got staples from a like a pneumatic staple gun, like the really skinny ones. Here's one I managed to pull out, right? But they actually are in between here and around that post. For me to be able to get them out, I was having to get that one out, I had to hammer from this side and hope that it went through out. But what was happening was a lot of these, like the strut was starting to split. So I think that if I try and get all of those out, I'm actually going to damage a lot of my basket, which I don't want. So what I'm going to try and do is insert it into those areas. Try and get those points along the edge so that I can hammer them back in. And then I have some other nails that I will look to reinforce them with, because obviously this came apart, in which case those little staples are insufficient. So what I'm thinking is if I line up one end so that I can see that my staples are going to go in the right spot, I can try and hammer them in, and then I'll be able to fit the other side in. And then do the same on the other two sides, and then we'll come back and I'll show you a couple of little tips for adding some extra nails. So the problem with this was that all of those little staples weren't insufficient and they were all starting to pop out. So what I am looking at doing is I'm taking fairly small nails, but what I am looking at doing, and this is the easiest, these are tiny nails. I got fat fingers and I got to get them into little spaces. So what I am doing is where these come down and they're resting right by my wood, I am kind of inserting a nail. So I hold on to it until I can get it inserted there. And then I can hammer it down in, I'm just making sure it doesn't go through, so that it is through the wood and down at an angle into this wood. And that's gonna hold it a lot better than these little staples, which quite honestly are sitting way up in the air, and there's only a teeny tiny little bit of them that's even touching down to hold this in place at all. So sometimes when you're doing these thrift flips, things that were going to be your simplest projects, that you were going to be able to flip really fast, that weren't a big deal, become your problem children. I thought that this basket was going to be my problem child, but I just got longer nails and I was able to nail that in, and it's sturdier than it ever was. So that one I expected to maybe have some challenges with, and I did, but they were mild in comparison to this. Now, look how lovely that board looks. Remember, it was that pale color. This is the coffee stain. So that part, it went great. I've waxed it, and yeah, love the color, love the rustic look of it. Now, if you'll recall, it had these leaves, these leaf knobs that were used as a hook. I like them, and I like them in the matte black. But if you remember, when we were unscrewing them, a couple unscrewed from the base, a couple left their posts behind and unscrewed there, which no big deal. I can screw this back in with a little bit of glue or contact cement. I can screw the other ones onto here. But this one on the end snapped off. So I did end up being able to find a post from, I call them breakaway screws. And they're not really screws, like they screw in, but they've got a flat end, but they have maybe 3 different sections that are unthreaded. And you can use just pliers to break them apart to various lengths. So I use these a lot. So what I did do was I broke off this post because I didn't want this end. I just wanted a little bit of the threads sticking out. And I thought, great. Except then I remembered the rest of the screw part is still stuck in here. I tried seeing if there was enough of a lip of it to be able to take pliers and screw it out. That didn't work. And I think because it's glued up in there. So I did take a metal bit on my drill, and I tried very carefully. I wrapped this all up in a lot of cloth, so I was holding onto the cloth nowhere near this because it was going to be very narrow. And I tried to drill down beside it because it's a little pointy. I couldn't drill right on top of it, with the idea that either I'd be able to kind of push it away and then get it out, or create a new hole. That didn't work. So I probably don't have super great bits, or I don't have a powerful enough drill, or I'm a bit of a suck and I was afraid that I was just going to screw everything up. So what I ended up doing was, really, at the end of the day, I can use the 4 out of the 5 for a different project and just flip to different knobs. And that's just going to make my life easier. So that's where we're at. I went through my stash. So I keep all of the knobs that I take off of pieces, and I always check the baggies when I'm thrifting for other hardware pieces. So these knobs I thrifted for $2.99, and I probably got them on Senior's Day, so I got them for 30% off. And they're just cute little, kind of detailed little guys. So they fit on the existing screws, so they will go down and they will tighten. They fit on the one that I added, which means in these 2 that are missing, I can do the same thing. I can take my pliers, and all I do is I hold them so you can see that there's those ridges there. So I take these, I want that full section. I'm going to take them close to it, and then I just use the leverage to snap them off. And then I still have a perfectly good piece. And then this one, I can screw down into that hole. These take a fair bit. I mean, they all have a screw with them, but if I screw up from through the base, this is designed to sit flush. It's got the hanging hardware here. It's designed to fit flush. And I could use the screws, but they're not long enough to go through my board. And then I have to countersink from the back. And it just becomes even more complicated on something that is just a board with hooks and was supposed to be really fast and simple. So I'm not doing that. So I'm just going to screw those in. I want these perhaps a little darker because our last ones were like a pale champagne gold, and the board was kind of like a pale champagne gold. I've taken the board darker, and now these sort of disappear. So I am going to have to go do my spray painting thing again. But what I liked about using these ones as opposed to other knobs that I had was, at the end of the day, this is just a board with knobs for people to hang things on. I'm not going to be commanding a huge price on it. So $2.99, well, $3 less 30%. So really, this is like $2.10. So that price is right for what I originally paid for the board and what I paid for the knobs and what I'd be able to get selling it. Putting on $5, $8, $12, $15 knobs on this, 5 knobs, doesn't make sense because nobody is going to be paying like $40, $50 for this board. So I had some old wooden knobs that I could have used and spray painted them black, but still, then it's really pretty blah. And I at least thought interesting knobs worked. But that was an awesome deal to find on the thrift store rack, but always check the baggies for this exact reason. So I'm going to finish this off. I'm going to go spray paint these again. I just was dealing with the stink for these guys, and now I don't need those guys. So they can go in this baggie and they could be used for something else, but I'm going to throw out you. Well, okay, I'm not throwing it out. I'm just not putting it in my knobs because I don't know what I could do with that, but maybe something. Maybe I just need to actually throw something out and just say, I don't like you anymore. You've caused me a lot of grief and anxiety and I don't want you in my life. And I may do that. Sometimes letting something go is the best alternative. So I'm going to get this guy finished up and get going with it. I have my little, I was going to call it an acorn, my finial, my artichoke finial, done and kind of polished up. So you can see how that turquoise wax kind of sits down in the crevices, that little dark wax has darkened it down. It's kind of shined up a little bit. There's just a couple of spots, a couple of little detail areas where I'm going to take Dark and Decrepit by DIY. Now this self-seals, and you can use it as a bit of an antiquing glaze. And there's just some places that I just want to kind of emphasize a little bit more. And let me see if you guys can see. It's not huge. You know, some of these things that I do are more for me than anybody else. But I'm kind of darkening some of the tips a little bit. They're just a little bit, it's just a little bit more. It's a little bit subtle. I use my finger to blend. And I use this exactly this way with a little tiny paintbrush on furniture all the time. So I'll use it in crevices and down in the details of things. And I had a dresser from the early 1800s, and I probably spent about 3.5, 4 hours doing this on all the moldings and all the details because it made a difference. To me, it made a difference. If you saw like half and half, you know, the left side was done, the right side wasn't, then you could see. But you couldn't walk up and say, ooh, what's all that brown stuff on there? So I'm just gonna continue to do this because I know it will look better, even though at the end, you won't look at it and say, oh, interesting use of dark and decrepit. Well, as luck would have it, I just got finished talking to you about our finished projects to realize I didn't push record. It's been a busy day. It's been a busy day here in the shop. So let me show you our finished projects. First up, we had our little log cabin. Now, admittedly, this did not need a lot of work, but we did paint out the roof, we painted out the base, and did a little bit of distressing and waxing, a little bit of dark wax, just to age them out a little bit. And then because I had the coffee stain out, we coffee stained these wood pieces. All of those wood pieces were kind of bright white, and they didn't go with the log cabin look. Now it's much cuter. It's already set with a stake to be able to insert into the ground or into a big potted plant. I love this, definitely cute. And again, it was a thrifted item, just need a little bit of zhuzhing to be able to make it work, right? And that's perfect. Sometimes it doesn't take a lot. Here was our loom. And if you recall, this was definitely old. It was dusty. The paint job had seen better days. And it was in that black with kind of that off-white. Now we've got the shape of the loom. And what I love about this is its narrow profile. So it's not the big, wide, fat duct that's going to take up a lot of counter space or table space. Definitely, you know, using it on like a credenza or something, it's going to be at the back. You're still going to have lots of space to be able to put other elements around it to create a vignette or up on a bookshelf, and just a much lighter, cleaner look for it with that DIY farm fresh, some light distressing, the clear, and then the white wax to soften it all out. It's definitely a more updated look. We also had our artichoke. I keep wanting to call it a pine cone. I don't know why I'm in Christmas mode still. It's the beginning of March, come on. But you can see the difference from that bright copper that we started out painting it with, adding a little bit of the elements of the turquoise that you can see peeking out from some of those details. We added some dark wax over the top to tone it down. And then I finished with a little bit of the dark and decrepit, which is very translucent. It self-seals, but it's very translucent when you're applying it. So it allows you to kind of create shadowing and more than anything else. So I was able to use it in the lows and then just pull it out. So it definitely added just that extra little dimension to it. So I love the look of this. It's not in your face copper, but it gives it a much cleaner, more modern look. Usually there's a problem child in every kind of thrift flip, and I didn't expect this one to be it, but it was. I love how it turned out though. That coffee staining is like one of my fave things to do to raw wood now. It just gives such a rich character to the wood, allows you to still see some of the graining. I waxed this as a finish. You could have hemp oiled it. You could have used a polyacrylic to be able to seal it. And I don't mind the look of these matte black knobs on it. We started off with those leaves, which would have been lovely. Now I have 4 of them to use on a different project, so they'll be lovely in that project. But when I was going through my knob stash, I wanted something that had a little bit of interest to it. And these ones definitely have some of that detailing showing through rather than just a plain wooden knob, which was one of my options to paint those black. But these ones had a lot more detailing, a little bit more character, which going on to just a plain board was a plus, which was why I was lamenting perhaps the loss of the leaves. But I like the look of these. They go well, and the price point works because I was able to thrift them for just a little bit over $2, which was a steal. But one of the things to consider. The advantage of these knobs was price point. I mean, they're perfect. They've got a little bit more detail, but one of the things to bear in mind, you certainly don't want to be adding in 5 knobs that cost you $5 each, because now you're looking at $25 just for the knobs. What did I pay for this, which I've lost my little sheet somewhere over there with other things drawing on it. But then you're looking kind of going, okay, now my price point, my sale price point has probably gotten higher than really this is worth. So finding knobs like that, they're going to still have the detail, still add interest, super cute, but that aren't going to price that project out of the marketplace bonus. The other thrift piece, which I thought was going to be the problem child, but actually the only challenge was adding in our nails. And I found that going with a slightly longer nail worked way better. So longer than what I showed you. I was able to go through the struts successfully because it wasn't a super fat nail, and be able to get it adhered into the wooden slat. So it is much stronger than it ever started out being with just those little staples that had been shot in there, because they just didn't have the strength to be able to hold any kind of weight. So not only is it prettier and cleaner looking, it is much stronger and more durable. So let me know what your guys' favorite project is. I have to say that the knobs and board are probably my least favorite, only because it gave me a headache. But I love it now, so maybe I don't have to hold that against it any longer. I can let that grudge go. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Certainly appreciate your being here for this one. And until then, take care.